Pyramid One Radio.
Welcome to Pyramid One World Radio Network. You can call in and talk to our hosts by dialing 60547257666, then dial the access code 60860 hash and be ready to be part of a worldwide movement to educate everyone listening to these shows. Let's begin dialing.
This is a Pyramid One International Network presentation. Dr. Randall George Nozawa welcomes the world to his new show right here on Pyramid One Radio Network called Be the Change. First, a little bit about your host. Dr. Randall George Nozawa had played high school football in Honolulu and later became a professional bodybuilder. When he moved to Washington, the muscle-bound Nozawa enrolled at University of Washington's dental school, studied hard, and faithfully graduated. Dr. Nozawa became to be a prominent dentist, and years later he opened a handful of dental clinics, which now, through his work, could finally afford the lifestyle he had always wanted. Then a tree came crushing down and foiled his best-laid plans. This was one of two life-changing tragedies that changed his life forever. During his resulting and prolonged stay in the hospital, and as he took a year to learn to walk again, his wife, Deborah, hired temporary dentists to keep the clinics open. Yet, when the businesses performed poorly under the temporary staff, family finances plummeted. And with all his medical bills accumulating, Nozawa felt he needed to return to work, but could not. That's when Nozawa realized he could not perform his dental duties to the high standard he was accustomed. The accident took away his sight, and even with assistant devices for the seeing impaired, he felt his dentistry skills were now substandard, which made him have to close his clinics to so many patients that loved him so much and the work he did for all of them. Then again, tragedies hit again, and this time he came close to death. Dr. Randall George Nozawa, now blind, got caught in the middle of a couple's domestic violence incident on one fateful night. In the heat of the domestic violence, Dr. Nozawa was shot in the head from 12 inches away. The crime shocked and rocked the community of Gig Harbor, where it occurred, and received its due amount of attention in the area newspapers. Looking back on it, Nozawa said that getting shot feels like thumping your forehead with the heel of your hand. It does not hurt. He did not yet know that the bullet had shattered and bore a hole through his palate, destroying molars, nearly severing his tongue. and destroying his only eye. All he knew was that he could not see and he was bleeding. Dr. Randall George Nozawa, after all his pain and enlightenment due to near-to-death experiences. Now, the doctor is here for the world and you, the audience, to learn, listen, and awaken. Some of the subjects he's going to touch on are the 8 pillars of wellness, which are nutrition, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, relationships with self, others, with the environment, management of toxins, finances, many of the new technological advances that have brought many solutions and conveniences, but also more new problems. And sadly, greed, power, and sex. Food that's no longer fresh from the earth and our water has been hijacked and contaminated by the big agricultural businesses or chemical companies like the ones we know about, and poisoned with herbicides or insecticides and antibiotics, petroleum products stored in chemical bleaching plastics filled with illness-causing GMOs and used as a political fodder to control humankind, infecting us with diseases and making us beholden to the pharmaceutical criminal racket. Combine the enormous stresses of earning an income, inactivity because of work requirements, and travel, the toxins building up in our bodies, divine gifted bodies, and sliding further in the sinkhole of hopelessness and helplessness. Humankind is suffering, and dying. Call the doctor today on his shows. Talk to the doctor. Listen to a show that will probably be a #1 daytime listening show on or before the year 2020, I predict. With great respect, it is Pyramid One Worldwide Radio Network's honor to introduce Dr. Randall George Nozawa. Good evening, Doctor.
Wow. That was so fantastic. Well, I've got to make a movie out of that thing one of these days. And thank you so much. And thank you to you and Pyramid Mud. And today's a very special day. I've got 2 of my most favorite people here. And just to tell you a little bit about my guest, his name's Nickolas Vassili. And yes, very Greek. Yes, he is. I met Nickolas over 20 years ago, and I came into my dental clinic and we started to talk. And what I learned from this gentleman was life, and another life that wasn't my own, and with different type of experiences and different ways to communicate knowledge and how to express oneself. And you've seen the promo that was put up there, but Nickolas is skilled at many things. And I would say, just in preparation for this show, that with all that he knows and what all he has learned and all that he has helped people with and all that he has done, he's skilled at loving. I think, wow, what weird and emo-like of you. Not really, because what he has done is he's taken interests and turn them into some subconscious paradigms. And he shares all that knowledge with other people because he's one for truth, he's one for understanding, he's one for, confronting the problems that arise and to make your life a lot better. So this forces you to learn, to be better, and that's the Kaizen principle, constant improvement. And he shares all this knowledge. So not only is he very skilled and interested in the music and art world as an organizer for international music festivals and being a editor of a newspaper, as well as handling the development and production of a world music group called Children of the Revolution, who became very popular and performed in many locations overseas. But he had his time in Hollywood, creating plays that he still does now, creating productions, and akin to his current endeavors these past 20 years of being teaching fitness, the kind of fitness that he wants, and a lot of it's Eastern based, and also as a certified hypnotherapist. Now, so everyone out there, and thank you, Pyramid One, for the 138 country audience, appreciate it, is that early on in this century, there are people like Milton Erickson, Virginia Satir, okay, Fritz Perls, who invented a Gestalt therapy, and Carl Rogers, who created person-centered therapy, then becoming humanism, and then positive psychology. In this mix is my friend, Nickolas Vassili, as he used hypnotherapy in his practice, taught other practitioners how to use it, and teaching schools, organizations of what that is and how you can control a mind, how you can heal a mind, and how you can overcome fears, worries, doubts, PTSD, addiction, okay, past trauma, past assaults. But he's a man of many hats, and what is so interesting about him, and where I think all of you out there listening and watching will see, is that he leads with love. And you can see that with his wife, Nan, just beautiful children, and all of the patients that he's helped, all the people that have listened to the music that he's produced and directed, and just being him. And I'm so just grateful to have him, on the show, and to call him a very dear friend. Nickolas, welcome.
Thank you, Randall. In talking with you several weeks back about appearing on this show, I mentioned a number of topics that I might like to go into, and I vacillate between them, talking about the current Me Too movement in America, mental health, ageism, depression, physical fitness. I go from one to the other moment by moment. And what I'd like to do is kind of meander a bit. And as I'm doing this, I would greatly appreciate if you or Bob would jump in with a direct question. I love answering questions. To begin with, today is an unusual day with me, and appropriate in terms of being on this show, because for a number of reasons, I'm going to begin an all-out fast today. I've been fasting for about 50 years, and it's something I have a deep belief in, and something that I have been confronted about by doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists and nutritionalists and so-called American experts who basically know nothing about fasting, and who tell the public that fasting is dangerous. It will erode your organs. You cannot allow them to be depleted. Well, Randall, you and I both know, and I can't speak for you, Bob, but you and I both know a lot about physical fitness and exercise. It's part of our lifestyle. And when we exercise, as I did yesterday, I did a very full heavy body workout for over an hour and 10 minutes, one of the things we need to do is to recover. We can't just keep working out and working out. The body needs some recovery time. So when it comes to explaining fasting, what I tell people and what they're totally in the dark about is that your organs also need recovery time. They're working day in and day out. What makes us think that they don't need a rest, a vacation from time to time?
When you're saying that, I'm thinking what's going through my mind right now, the word that I can see is cellular rejuvenation.
Exactly. We need it very badly. But there's another aspect to it that most people have no idea of. When we fast, it's not just to lose weight, which is vitally important in our heavily obese society, but it's to retrain the mind. Our first addiction as human creatures is food. It starts almost when we're in the womb. And once we're tasting that bit of sugar, it becomes an addiction. And it gets stronger and stronger, which in great part accounts for why our society is so obese and suffering from so many degenerative illnesses. I don't know if the public knows this by and large, but America, our great society, our learned society, suffers from more cancer and heart disease and stroke and diabetes and depression than any nation in the industrialized world. And part of that is because not only do we not know how to eat, but we don't exercise. A lot of people, as they're getting older, have contacted me and said, well, I think I'm in good shape for the future, for quality longevity, because I eat properly. And they're surprised when I say, that's not going to get you there. I did a study about 15 years ago. I looked at the lives of the most prominent people in the field of health and nutrition, the people who wrote all the bestsellers, the people who are constantly being interviewed on television. And guess what I found? None of them, none, lived a quality life of longevity. On average, they died at the age of 67 and didn't die of natural causes. They died of disease. Wow. Why? Because they didn't exercise. I use as my favorite example a friend of mine named J.I. Rodale. I don't know how many people out there are familiar with the magazine Prevention. It's perhaps the oldest health magazine in America, founded by J.R. Rodale back in the early 50s, I believe. And I knew Rodale very well. Beside having the magazine and other publications, he was a playwright and had his own theater in New York City and produced plays which were unfortunately terrible. He was a horrible playwright, but he had the money to produce full equity company plays. J.I. Rodale was invited to appear on television one day, and he was on a show, and he was talking about health, and he turned to the narrator and said, I've decided to live to be 100. Seconds later, the narrator turned and looked at J.I. and saw there was something wrong. J.I. was dead. He died of a massive heart attack. J.I. knew more about nutrition and diet and health than anyone under the sun, but he didn't know about exercise. So when it comes to quality longevity in life, exercise is the key ingredient. As we get older, we get into our 50s, it far surpasses diet. You can eat all the right foods, have the perfect diet, That's not going to lead you to quality longevity if you don't exercise. And along with exercising, to go back to my original point, we must fast in order to give the body that period of rejuvenation that it needs, and in order to retrain the mind, because the mind is what suffers and creates overweight and obesity. In 1969, about 2 weeks before I married Nan, I found myself overweight. I had been running a lot of therapy groups and sitting, being sedentary for so many hours a day. I put on about 12 pounds that I didn't want. I didn't want to look overweight for my wedding. So I turned to two dear friends who had lived in India with a spiritual master named Thakur, Sri Sri Anakul Chandra Thakur, and I asked them about losing weight. And Ray Hauserman, one of the two gentlemen, said, well, you should fast. Well, I had gone on many diets throughout my lifetime, but fasting I knew nothing about. So he put me on a 4-day fast. The first day at 10 o'clock in the morning, I would have a bowl of brown rice with a green banana and a glass of water. Nothing else. The second day, 2 hours later at 12 noon, the same rice, banana, and water. The third day, again, 2 hours later, the same thing. And the fourth day, nothing. So I eagerly went into this 4-day fast. And on the first day, after 16 hours, I began to hallucinate. The ceiling fixture became an omelet. The telephone was a hamburger. And a day later, and it was a Sunday, a friend of ours in our community, Dennis, had the nerve, the gall, to put up fried eggs and bacon and fresh coffee and toast. And I felt like killing. Why? Because the mind is so attuned to the greed of eating, the lust of eating, and the inability to correct itself. Fasting will help you do this. I lost 17 pounds on that 4-day fast. Looked great on my wedding day, I'm happy to say. And I continued to fast. And over the years, I started experimenting more and more. And I eventually, in 1977, went on an all-out fast without any food or water. Now you're going to say I'm crazy, I'm lying, I'm making this up now. But it went on for 31 days.
Yeah, I've heard of that one. Yeah, from the Himalayas.
Oh, the people in that region of the world go up in trees and don't take anything for 6 months. It's been documented for decades.
Yep.
Our mentality has been, we will die, we will suffer. Why? Well, for one thing, the food industry doesn't want you fasting. Last thing in the world they want is for you to do a fast. And for another thing, the medical people know nothing. They're taught practically zilch about fasting and how healthy it is for the body. So I'm going on a fast today. And I don't know how long it will last. My last fast went for 13 days. I don't do it in order to lose weight as much as to cleanse my soul, which is another aspect of it that is so important. We all need to empty out all the grief and the pain and the hurt and the hate that we experience in everyday life. So fasting accomplishes that as well. And this is one way I have of dovetailing into the major thing I want to talk about, which is mental health. Now, there's a lot of confusion about that because we, as a nation, have experienced so many massive killings over the years. Serial killings, it's called, where people indiscriminately kill 8, 10, 20 people and then kill themselves. And usually the day after that happens, the major news sources begin revealing the background of this. And what you read basically is centered around two things. One, mental health. And two, anger. Both are myths. Mental health, as we know it, does not exist. It's a lie. It's a fraud. As a therapist for 53 years, I've learned time and time again that it does not exist. What exists is emotional reality. Nobody ever came to me and said, I think depressed. They always say, I feel depressed. It's an emotion. But what do we do in our society? And Bob, can I use a curse word or not? I don't know.
You may. Yes, you may.
Okay. In our society, we have managed on a professional and all-out level to bastardize human emotions, starting with anger. Anger is a very natural emotion. Now, I wasn't around when the powers that be up in heaven created the design for the human creature and all other creatures. But I know that we're designed with skin and bones and blood and vessels and organs and something we call emotion. We have it. Maybe we'd be better off without it, as it turns out, but we feel a great deal. And anger is one of those feelings. And as an example, can I use you, Randall?
Please, go ahead.
Randall and I have had a very deep association on many different levels. Now, let's say, for the sake of what I'm talking about, that Randall and I get into a disagreement, a dispute, and it gets really deep and nasty. And either Randall or I turn to one another and say, I need you to stop this because I'm so damn angry at what you're doing. You're hurting me. Stop doing it. That's anger. It's a human emotion, what we feel at that moment. Now, supposing one or the other takes that human emotion and instead of releasing it and helping to resolve it, allows it to fester inside of themselves. And slowly it turns into, instead of, I need you to stop hurting me, it turns into, why, you rotten bastard, you're just no good and lousy. Now it's vileness. Now we're trying to hurt one another. That has nothing to do with anger. And we take it another step. We start threatening. If you don't shut your mouth, that's not anger either. And then we take it to its ultimate level, violence, which has nothing to do with basic human anger. If all those people who ended up killing innocent people had been able to express their anger in a normal, healthy way, those killings would never have happened. But they were denied the right. Because in our society, you're not allowed to get angry. In fact, they tell people, you need anger management.
Management, right. I was going to say that, yeah.
Why not violence management? We don't hear about that, do we?
No.
Violence is welcomed. Turn on the TV, and what do you get? Violence, violence, violence.
Hate.
Yeah, of course. So we need to deal with that. I did a speaking engagement just a few days after that massive killing in Connecticut about 5 years ago, where that young man killed 22 people, including his own mother and himself. And at the speaking engagement for the National Hypnotists Guild, I discussed this problem. And the next day, I got a lengthy email from someone who had been at the meeting, and she said, I hope you don't think I'm presumptuous, but I want to just put out some other evidence in support of what you said. And what she presented was a list of all the major serial killings over the past 25 years. She had the name of the individual, the location, the number of people that were killed, etc. Second paragraph beside it was a listing of all the pharmaceuticals involved in that person's life. And the third paragraph, all the psychiatry involved. Now, if you study, say, the history of all the famous personalities in Hollywood who have died untimely deaths, whether you're talking about Judy Garland or Marilyn Monroe or Elvis Presley, or a wonderful man named Robin Williams, who I had the great privilege of working with on the movie Hook for 3 months in Hollywood, you will find that systematic correlation between the inability to express human emotion and medication and the psychiatrists.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but the medication is a blocker.
Oh, the medication destroys any hope of dealing with human problems. And it doesn't work. In fact, it ends up being the person's identity. I recall a woman, 38 years old, called me one day, and she said, I was diagnosed as severely depressed about 20 years ago, and I've been on medication ever since. I can no longer tolerate it, and I feel suicidal. Can you help me? She came in to see me, and we spoke for about 40 minutes. We had a general consultation, and she was more lucid than I expected her to be after so many years on medications. And I turned to her in the most loving way and said, you know, you're as much severely depressed as I am. Now, you would hope that that would instill some sense of, oh, maybe there's hope. What she did instead, she backed her chair away and then turned and stared at my credentials on the wall and my license. And the expression on her face was, how dare you try to take away my depression? It becomes an identity along with all the other supposed parts of mental illness. Let's look at them. The latest, PTSD. Now that's about 20, I don't know exactly, 20, 25 years old. Prior to it being known as PTSD, it was called shell shock. After the First World War, tens of thousands of soldiers were suffering from shell shock. They were put in hospitals, and not surprisingly, the only thing that helped them was art therapy. They were taught to paint, to draw, to act, to sing, and it was helping them a lot. And then the medical people came in, the doctors and psychiatrists, with their solution, and that ended any hope of really pulling these people together. So many, many decades later, some smartass turns around and says, we got a big cash cow out there that we're not tapping into, called shell shock. But we haven't got that many veterans from Iraq or Afghanistan to keep getting people caught. Let's give it a new name. PTSD. That pulls everybody into it. Now, if you just bite your nails too much, you've got PTSD. If you scratch your hair, you've got PTSD. Great moneymaker, PTSD. Depression. Lincoln suffered from something they called melancholy, which eventually became depression. And then it became manic depression, which was a fair enough explanation of the highs and lows of human emotions and how it can affect people. But then some of these clever, wise-ass guys got together and said, there's another big cash cow we're not tapping into. What can we do? They came up with bipolar. Bipolar. And they associated bipolar with a number of supposed problems up here in the mind and brain, protein disorders, different kinds of things that are affecting the way we feel and think, and bipolar. You know what? It's a complete fraud. No one's ever proven it. It doesn't exist. I've had speaking engagements where I've had doctors get up during Q&A and say, are you telling me that people do not suffer from these disorders? I look at them and say, some of them are, but you know, there are tens of millions of people with the same supposed conditions who are not bipolar or depressed. Can you explain that? Of course they can't, because it's a fraud to begin with. Personality disorder. I had a woman come to me and she says, I'm suffering from 5 distinctly different personalities, all of which are in conflict with one another, and I don't know what to do. And I looked at her and I said, you know, I've got 2 twin grandsons who are about, at the time, 3 years old. They already suffer from about 6 personality disorders. And you know how many I have? At last count, 28. There's nothing wrong with that. It's human. We've got different parts to our personality and our humanity. But these clever wise guys label it a disorder that needs medication and management. It's a fraud, a lie. Same with obsessive compulsive. That's another clever one. I go to sleep at night, and sometimes I have to stop and say to myself, did I lock the door? Did I put the chain on? And I'm concerned about that because we had a break-in some years ago. And so I'm aware of it. I'm going to be 83 years old, and I'm even more aware of it. Safety. So I go to the door and I say, oh, I did put the chain on and locked it. Call the men in the white coats for me because I'm suffering from obsessive compulsive disorder and need to check my door 2 or 3 times. Is it an illness? No. We've created all of these things. Now, why have we created this mental health picture?
I've got a question for you. I'm going to stop,
please. Sure.
I'm going to stop you on that subject.
Yep.
Where does dementia come into this?
Dementia.
I have seen people do things over and over again because they never remembered doing it the first time.
Right, exactly. What is dementia? Well, I've dealt with dementia for a long, long time. And I've dealt with on a level where I've been able to watch people, the age of 55, 60, right, 65, slowly grow into this condition we call dementia. And you know what it is? 1, neglect, personal feelings of sorrow, friends are passing, you no longer have the connections you had, you get less spirited about life, and you begin to sink into this pattern of, oh God, you don't feel good. You don't feel any purpose in life. And it grows, and finally a family member or friend takes you to a doctor, and he gives you a brief examination and says, he's got the onset of dementia. And it continues, especially when they get on the medications. That's how it develops.
So in other words, there is a way to curb the
Absolutely.
Completely by not treating it as a disease.
Absolutely. It is not a disease. Age is not a disease, though in America it becomes one. Ageism is rampant in this country. Nobody talks to anyone who is older. I have to go to Newfoundland to be among people who treat me as a human being, not as an age. Nobody gives a damn about how old you are there. Nobody's a stranger there. You go to a community party and 19, 20-year-old girls will come up to me to dance. 20-year-old men will ask men to dance. There's no, he's old, she's old. It's a human disfigurement in America.
Good word.
The whole illness situation comes down to this. It's a fraud. It's a lie. It is an industry, $1 trillion industry. Can you understand that? $1 trillion industry. They're not looking to prevent problems. They're not looking to solve problems. They're looking to sell you medications. They're looking to sell you management. They're looking to hook you on psychology, psychiatry, and medicine, and everything else under the sun. And they do not know enough about human emotion to even begin to deal with that. Now, the problem with human emotion is you can't make money on it. The only people who make money on human emotions are actors, singers, dancers, comics, musicians, and evangelists. They can make money on emotions. The medical people can't. So emotions are put in the drawer, bastardized, put aside. I mentioned anger before. Fear. The Dalai Lama was in Seattle, what was it, Randall, 8-10 years ago at Key Arena?
Yes.
And he was asked about fear, and his comment was a very beneficial emotion because it forces you to make a decision and do something. So what do we do with fear in our society? We turn it into disorders, panic disorders, stress disorders, things that need management and medicine to make money for these people. Instead of the doctor just turning to the individual and saying, you know, it sounds like you're frightened. And fear is a very normal human emotion, and you have to learn to deal with it. Anger, fear, pain. On the back of my book, Depression It Doesn't Exist, I have a paragraph saying, a woman loses her lover of 40 years, and she's in deep pain. Friends and relatives urge her to get professional help. So she goes to a psychiatrist, and after a very brief consultation, he turns to her and says, you're suffering from severe depression. The woman thinks about it for a moment, then looks at the doctor and says, no, I'm not. My lover has died and I hurt. Human pain is part of our life. We're born with it. It's the way we heal. Without the pain, we cannot heal. What are we, robots? If I pick up the phone and someone says to me, your closest friend just died in a car crash, well, let me know the address of the funeral home and I will send flowers. What am I, a robot? Of course I'm going to feel pain. But our society wants to medicate anger and fear and pain in order to make more money and to turn you into sick people.
There's the greed.
Oh, greed, jealousy, and lust. And we are sick. We have more cancer, more heart disease, more diabetes, more stroke than any country in the industrialized world. That's not my opinion. We surpass everyone in those basic health realities. And we're only going to get worse. And obesity, to go back to that one, is part of it. We can't stop eating and stuffing our mouths with garbage. And we don't exercise. 80% of the public does not exercise. And of that 20% that does, 90% of those people don't know what they're doing. You check those people out in gyms, and what do you see? They're walking around with water bottles. They're drinking water than exercising. They don't know. And the trainers don't know what they're doing. They got their credentials online after about 4 or 5 months. No. So all of that is a big lie, a big fraud. Mental health does not exist. It's all about emotional health. And in order to be emotionally healthy, you have to learn to express anger, fear, and pain in a normal way as part of your lifestyle.
Do you ever recommend to someone meditation
Oh, deeply. That's what I do all the time. Meditation and hypnosis, of course. It's
Okay.
vitally important, but it has to be done consistently.
Mm-hmm.
Every day, you must go into it more and more and more, and deeper and deeper and deeper. I learned it through the same gentleman who taught me fasting. And it was based on the teachings of my spiritual guide, Sri Sri Anakokandra Thakur, who was also the spiritual guide for no less than Mahatma Gandhi during the 40s.
Oh.
And so we're talking about something that is as vital to emotional health as anything could be. Meditation, self-hypnosis, absolutely important. I want to share this other thing with you as part of this overall picture. When I was 17, I enlisted in the Air Force. I didn't know what I was getting into at the age of 17, but I was following my instinct. I knew it was important. So I got on the bus and it took me up to Sampson Air Force Base for boot camp. Now, as much as I don't like the idea of what we're doing in all these foreign countries, I wouldn't want my son or daughter to go out to these places and get killed for no reason, but for the madness of politicians. But at the time, it was the Korean conflict. I enlisted and I got on the bus. I go up to Sampson Air Force Base with 80 other recruits. We get off the bus and we're marched to a parade ground, and we're told to be at ease, stand at ease. And about 20 feet away in a lean-to is a airman first class. He was the drill instructor who would be responsible for us. And it starts to rain. It starts to pour. All get out. And he sits in the lean-to smoking and drinking a Coke while we're getting soaked and freezing to death. And after about a half hour of this, it finally stops raining, and Airman First Class Over steps out of the lean-to and carefully walks around the puddles so as not to get water on his spit-shine boots. And he sizes up the troops very carefully, one at a time. And he leans back and says, "Airman, I'm going to tell you something right now that you better hear. If you do hear it, it will change your life. If you fail to hear and respond to it, you will be damned for the rest of your life." Now, I didn't know if this was another one of these holy rollers or evangelists. I didn't know any more than anybody. You know what this guy was about to tell us. So, plus, we were freezing and exhausted and didn't know what was going on. And he looks at us and he points up to the sky and says, "Hear this carefully. Believe nothing that you're told or read or hear, and only half of what you see." Now, I can tell you that the 80 recruits, myself included, didn't understand that very well. But I can tell you now, all these decades later, that it was the wisest advice I ever heard. Because it's the distinct difference between all of our mentally disturbed people, because we do not listen to ourselves or develop our own individual understanding of life, but buy into whatever we're told. We're lost. That's why we are who we are. We are not individuals because we don't use our own minds. We don't do our own homework. And if I could just give you, with time left, a brief example of how important that can be. My dearest friend, Neil Selden, when I came back from Greece, my wheel came back from Greece in 1996, told me that he was suffering from terminal cancer and that he had 2.5 years to live. That's if he did extreme surgery, chemo, and then radiation. And Neil and his wife said, "No, we're going to fight this through. We're going to find an answer." So they went everywhere they could. They talked to everyone they could talk to, went through another 8 oncologists, all who gave them the same: you got 2.5 years to live at the most if you do these surgery, chemo, and radiation. And they still refused. And lo and behold, someone told them about a small community group called Citizens, I think it was called Citizens Against Cancer. located in a place called Ortho, Iowa. Have either of you gentlemen heard of Ortho, Iowa? Do you know where it is? I don't think you can find it on the map.
Well, in the middle of nowhere.
Right. Maybe there's 400 or 500 people there.
Or less.
Right. They contacted this small group. They were told to send the medical records and a membership fee of, I think it was $35. And 3 weeks later, they got a protocol that was entirely different based on an herbal medicine treatment program and an oncologist that supported it. Neil lived another 22 years because he didn't pay attention to the stupid advice of all the experts. So my advice to everyone, if I can give it in this brief time that we have.
Oh, yes, you may. There's 10 minutes. Go ahead.
Do your own homework. Don't listen to what people tell you, no matter how concerned they might seem, because the truth of the matter is, and my father said it to me the night before he died, he was on his deathbed and he knew it. He was 47, dying of Hodgkin's disease. And he turned to me and held my hand and he said 2 things. He said, 1, take care of your mother. And 2, misery loves company. Don't forget that. And I don't know where he got that from. He was not a psychologist. He was not a learned person. But that hit me. Misery loves company. Another reason why we're so ignorant and follow the paths of all of these other ignorant people. They want us to join them with their stupidity. Oh, you're feeling down? You have depression. Go to a doctor and get some medication for it. Oh, you're not feeling too well today. Don't exercise, rest. We get advice from people who don't know what they're talking about day in and day out, and we're foolish enough to take it in and to believe it instead of saying, no, I'm going to find out myself because I have a thing called a mind, a brain, and I should use it. And staying, instead of paying attention to all of this other nonsense. You may not like what I have to say. It may not seem reasonable to you. But again, I didn't make these things up, not based on my personal opinions, but based on 53 years of dealing with human problems and based on the truth of what exists in our society, such as what I've shared with you about we are the sickest society in the industrialized nation. It's not my opinion. I don't create that cancer and that heart disease and that other madness. We're also the most depressed nation in the world and the most violent. They relate to one another perfectly because we cannot express human emotions. Any questions or thoughts, gentlemen?
Nickolas, I could listen to you all. Well, I can listen to Bob all day too. Both of you have such unique experiences and unique knowledge and how you handle, the world. But just to go back to just what you've said here, and I wish we had hours and hours for this, because I'm analytic and I break things down. And just going back to your initial piece there with exercise and fasting. Fasting, so the study of that called autophagy won a Nobel Prize in 2016. Some guy studied it, and what they found out, and it's all very common, especially in the nutritional functional medicine world, is that fasting puts you into a state called autophagy. What that means is planned cell organ and cell death. And what happens with that planned cell death is that it creates amino acids, which regenerates other cells, and so it's a growth thing and helps your brain. And this was bred into us by our ancestors all these thousands and millions of years ago, because at that time they couldn't find food all the time. Largely it was plants, but not all of them were edible. So they would go days and weeks without eating. And what they found is that what we know now is that caused beneficial genetic mutations. So fasting is something that we all need to do. And Nickolas, there's enough science out there, especially in PubMed, and you'll find this through Dr. Joe Mercola, greenmedinfo.com, and sites like that, who all they do is they accumulate peer-reviewed studies. So there's a lot of it out there, but as you just had mentioned, the medical establishment, they don't want to hear that because they can't make money off of it. And just like, if you came to me and you had all these dietary problems and I told you to eat broccoli, which would, a lot of antioxidants, a lot of anti-cancer properties, the drug industry would not make any money. It's 1.2 trillion, by the way, and growing. And the cancer industry is, well over a billion. And the vaccine industry has gone from 30 million to 30 billion to in 5 years here coming up about 60 billion. So poison. And to your point again too, when they came up with the DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, way back when, a lot of people didn't sign on to that because now we're labeling and grading people. And over the course of the years and to the DSM-5 now, it's slightly different, but they give you a set of symptoms, and then that is supposed to tell you what's wrong, but it's actually for billing purposes. It has nothing to do. So we're labeling people and say you've got 3 out of the 5. Oh, you're depressed. Oh, you got bipolar. And there's a lot of studies now that indicate bipolar is a made-up term, as you know, but it's because we're medicating people so much, and now that they're getting opposite ends of these high emotions they can't express, and we try to suppress it for them. And with these medications, now they have the ups and the lows, and so we have to medicate that. So they gave it a name. And so if like you were saying, like with these people you've mentioned, they become identified or they label themselves by the disability or the thing that they were diagnosed for by all these smart doctors. In the early 1900s, John D. Rockefeller found out that he could make a lot of money by selling pharmaceuticals. So he invented something called a medical school. And he tried to shut down all the schools of naturopathy, all the holistic medical schools, all the Chinese medical schools, schools of chiropractic, because he wanted to develop something called the medical doctor, which, the MD, minor deity, becomes a shill to sell drugs. And he was right. Look at all these years later. We call this Western medicine. And I had a show with Bob here couple months ago called A Pill for an Ill. That's what we become. You can say, oh, I have a headache. I've got a pill. Oh, I'm sad. I have a pill for you. Oh, I have this shoulder ache. I've got a pill for you. What do? You just keep on taking the pills. Well, when do I stop? No, you keep on taking them for the rest of your life. And so now the drug industry has a customer forever. And that's why it's $1.2 trillion in getting larger and larger, more profitable.
Could I interject one thought here?
Yep, go ahead.
Along the lines of what you're saying, what people do not realize is happening to them as they're becoming addicted to these pills. And it's not just what the label is telling you or what the TV commercials are telling you. And by the way, we're the only industrialized nation of the world that allows those TV commercials. But what these people do not...
New Zealand also.
Yep, us in New Zealand.
The only other country except us.
Okay. And what none of these people tell you, and here is the most destructive part of it, is that while you're ingesting this junk, and the street addict accurately calls it junk, we are comprising, compelling, destroying, compromising our immune system.
We're shutting it
The
off.
thing that changes us from every creature in the world is our brain and our immune system. We don't use our brain, and we destroy our immune system. And we end up sick permanently, leading to dementia and all the other age-related problems.
They're creating vegetables. That's exactly what they're doing. I mean, you got to put it this way, and with the drugs and everything else they give you, just like you both are talking about, it goes on and on. I mean, I had it one time in that I've actually been standing behind a person. I wasn't buying drugs. I was buying something else. But I was on a line, and a woman was buying $1,000 worth of monthly drugs. It was in a big bag. I'm talking big bag. I'm serious. You could hear the bottles inside the bag. And people do it all the time. Now, I'm in Florida right now. I'm not saying that Florida's bad, but you got to figure, I would say a good 40 to 50 to 60% of what's down here is over 55 in one way or another.
Retired, right?
Okay. So those people, you go to a Walgreens or a CVS or Rite Aids or whatever, Publix, or you go to Walmart's, you see these people walking out with bags, all of them.
Right.
I'm serious. I mean, somebody's going to pop me in the nose and that when I tap them on the shoulder and say, "What do you got in the bag?" I'm dying to see what they have in there.
We know our society by looking inside the medicine cabinet in everyone's bathroom, and it tells us who we are.
Yeah, exactly. Now, in my house, when you're on that subject, in my house, okay, my partner, she's Miss Organic USA. She has a banner that she's got right across her shirt. It says, "I am Organic USA." You should see the things we have in this house. If you got this, you take this. You got this, you take this. I'm telling you right now, I must be the healthiest old man on two legs. And you talk about...
How old are you?
I'm going to be 69.
69, okay. You're a youngster then. And
Yeah.
Well, okay, well, look, when I catch up to you, don't worry about it. You'll still be around. But we were talking about exercise and things. Every single morning I get up at 3:00 in the morning. That's my regimen. Me and the dog, we take a long walk in the morning. And I meditate while I walk. I clean my mind out. You talked about it before. There are so many things that we can do every day in our life that are so simple to do. And some of the things that we do anyway, but we don't realize why we're doing them. So they don't do any good because we're not using them.
There are so many simple things we can do, not just for ourselves, but for our society. I mentioned one at a meeting of a spiritual organization that invited me to talk. At the end of the talk, I looked around and I said, when I drove up here, I had a hard time finding a parking space. There must be about 1,500 cars out there. How about all of you spiritually minded people, when you leave here today, get in your cars, and before you turn the ignition on, say to yourself, "I'm going to drive with care and concern and love. I'm going to signal when I change lanes. If someone wants to get into a lane, I'm going to say, welcome."
Let them go first.
Right. I'm going to do that simple thing. How many of you here, and there were about 1,500 people there, are willing to do that? And you know what the response was? Silence. Looking at each other. What's he talking about? Simple thing to do. What am I asking you? Something that's, rocket science? Get in your car and drive like a human being. We refuse to do that. So as a result, 44,000 people die every year. 44,000 human beings die because we don't give a damn enough to drive like civilized human beings. And that's simple. That's not saying we're going to solve all the conflicts in the world overnight, but we can certainly do the simple things, as you are mentioning, Bob. But we refuse to do it. We will not do it.
I think we're not. I don't think we're. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I don't think we're stupid that we don't do those things. I think we're programmed not to.
That's part of it, certainly, and ignorance is part of the program as well.
Yep.
And we don't want to change. We absolutely don't want to change. Change, instead of being an inspirational thing, a thing of beauty, we get locked into who we are, and we refuse to change. And that includes sticking with the extremes of being hurtful and hateful, which goes on all day long. I go to a club every day. Nobody talks to me. Nobody talks to anybody. I'm always amazed at this. I look around for one face, one person to smile and say, "How the hell are you?" No. I go to Newfoundland. Everyone talks to everyone. There are no strangers there. People wave to you everywhere. If you're on a corner of rush hour in downtown St. John's and there's a lot of traffic and you want to cross the street, You make a motion across, everything stops. And it isn't begrudgingly, but the drivers will say, please go ahead. There's a wanting, a willingness to do this kind of thing. It doesn't exist here because we're so consumed with our hatred. And hatred, unfortunately, overcomes love too often. It shouldn't. Love should be the conquering hero. But unfortunately, hate consumes us, along with lust, jealousy, and all the other weaknesses of the human being, all of which we can change.
That's what you're here for, Nickolas and Bob.
How would you guys like to wrap that up?
No, terrific. No, thanks, Bob. I can talk with you all day, Nickolas. You see, what you've done, Nickolas, and this is Bob too, and that's why I've got this great show, is that you lead with love, because it starts with self-love, and you're sharing it because you care enough that of other people, and with all the knowledge you have, you want to impart that on them, because you know that they can live the life that they would most love to live, but they have to give themselves a chance. They got to get over this ego thing. And they have to ramp up that self-worthiness. They have to ramp up that self-love. They have to tell themselves, convince themselves that giving is a secret sauce to successful living. Giving, and that's it. And it feels good. And if every single person did that, there wouldn't be killing, violence, or name calling, and things like that. You lead with love, and that's what you do. And dear friend, I'm so grateful that we could have this time together.
I want to leave with just one simple statement. The idea is love, be loved, feel self-esteem, face life's challenges, and find peace. Pretty basic. Nothing confusing, no rocket science involved. We just have to do it.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Randall.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bob.
I tell you what, I'm going to unbeat you, Randall. Nickolas, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, either by email or whatever, what is your address?
aardvarknick@yahoo.com. aardvarknick@yahoo.com.
Well, there you go. And if for some reason that you don't remember that, and you're watching this film, write it down, for crying out loud. But you can also write to BobCharlesShow@live.com, and I will pass all your messages right over to Nickolas. Anybody that is on right now, and there's a lot of listeners all over the world right now. I mean, I'm looking at the graph that's up to the moon. All of you, if you want a copy of this will be in our channel for Pyramid 1 tomorrow. Anyone wants a copy of this actual YouTube, it'll be in the middle of the landing page tomorrow. And if you want just the audio, it'll be in the archive later. Australia will be putting it on in the next 15 minutes. So, with that, ladies and gentlemen, have a good night. Doctor, go ahead, Doctor.
Wow, thanks so much. What a great episode. Two of my most favorite people here. Thank you so much. Let's keep it going. A lot of work to do.
Oh, yes, we do. You have no idea. Ladies and gentlemen, listen, I say it all the time, and I'll say it right now. Go to the bathroom. Look in the mirror. Look in your eyes. Look closely. That's love. Say these two words. I am. God bless y'all. Bob Charles.